A lot of people hate gaming publishers. Most anyone who follows the space, and even many who don't for that matter, will be aware of the rock-bottom reputation that companies like EA, Activision Blizzard, or Epic Games have. To a lesser extent, though not very far behind, and arguably not lesser at all, you have companies like Bethesda, Take-Two Interactive, or Ubisoft. But the point I'm trying to make is that gaming publishers are not thought of highly in the current industry climate. It's been a multi-year saga now. Publishers do something anti-consumer, players react, and around we go. But in light of recent events, I believe that what has mostly appeared to be a fully entrenched and unflinching reality is actually shifting, and publishers are being forced to adjust their actions in a way that benefits consumers. To be clear, they do not want to do this. They have no choice. And while their bottom line motivations remain the same, I think it is well worth making a video and celebrating the fact that consumer friction has clearly been having an effect. People claim my content is too negative, but the truth is that positivity and negativity are all a product of context and framing. So today I want to analyze in a positive tone the negative situation for publishers, which is resulting in a number of beneficial effects for average consumers. The two main examples will be Ubisoft and EA, because both of these industry giants have recently had spotlight appearances which highlight the fact that they are being forced to adapt and improve after largely contributing to the collapse of industry integrity. To start with, we will focus on EA and their very recent publication of a new partnership with Valve. Mere hours ago, EA released a statement via their Twitter page which announces a looming partnership with Valve and Steam to bring popular EA titles to the competing digital storefront. The initial phase will include Jedi Fallen Order, but over time it will be expanded to include many of EA's cornerstone franchises and can widely be accepted as a beneficial effect for PC gamers. Exclusivity is a hot topic right now. The Epic Games Store is effectively leveraging exclusivity alone to create a new competitor in the digital distribution market, and most major publishers have their own storefronts as well, which disperse whatever first-party IP they own to a locked-in audience. This fragmentation of storefronts, however, was not always the case. Much like video streaming services, where once there was a single industry pioneer, such as Netflix or Steam, the landscape has rapidly been saturated as every single company with enough resources to make an attempt began clawing in for a piece of the proverbial pie. EA has their Origin launcher. It's a terrible launcher, but if you want to play EA titles, you have to use it. Ubisoft has Uplay. Again, not a great launcher, but acceptable, honestly. And to play a number of Ubisoft games, you must use it. These launchers also often come with subscription services, offer a direct-to-consumer distribution pipeline, which means full revenue retention, and overall the motivation is rather obvious. Force users to adopt your personal storefront and earn more money. For many months now, the industry has been dialing up its utilization of exclusivity. It's not just the Epic Store either. Other examples include Bethesda making Fallout 76 exclusive to the Bethesda launcher. And much like monetization with microtransactions or loot boxes being expanded upon like an absolute plague, it seemed as if the trend of exclusivity was only just getting started. With EA's announcement today, that trend has taken a sharp step backwards. EA's reputation is at or near an all-time low. In fact, if we examine Form 10K from Electronic Arts, which is an annual report filed by publicly traded companies and required by the SEC, which contains financial details and performance analysis, we can see that negative perception is an actual risk factor acknowledged both internally and externally by shareholders as a problem for the company's health. The language also defines this negative perception as being primarily tied to digital monetization items, and even goes so far as to say that negative sentiment about gameplay fairness, our business practices, business models, or game content also can lead to investigations or increased scrutiny from governmental bodies and consumer groups, as well as litigation which, regardless of their outcome, may be costly, damaging to our reputation, and harm our business. Effectively, our reputation is so low, it is a serious problem for the company's health. Not only that, but they are fully aware of why such a reputational collapse has occurred, which leads us forward to the announcement today. EA must continue to expand revenue, but with their 10K even outright acknowledging that their current monetization methods are a risk factor, they need to find another way. The pursuit of exclusivity to garner 100% retention of all revenue from their Origin launcher is good in theory, but in practice, not so much. The reality is that a smaller percentage of a larger pie is very often superior to full retention of a much smaller audience. EA is now relinquishing control of their popular franchises as an attempt to simultaneously boost their reputation and public perception, as well as access a larger audience and begin to supplement their microtransaction and loot box revenue streams, which are under intense consumer and governmental pressure. Say what you want about EA as a company, their games can be terrible, their corporate practices are greedy and tone deaf, but they are very often on the cutting edge of industry developments. Take loot boxes, for example. EA pioneered and popularized the mechanic in Western games. They are now taking the most heat for it as a result, but they are undeniably excellent at leveraging new ideas to expand their business. It just so happens, right now, as their current business model finds itself increasingly vulnerable, their new tactic happens to align with a consumer-friendly approach that increases the availability of their games on a platform that is superior to their own proprietary digital storefront. Overall, it's a win. And even when a win is awarded for less than optimal reasons, it's still a win. Next up is Ubisoft. Many viewers will be aware of Ghost Recon Breakpoint. The game is an unmitigated disaster. This is not an opinion, this is an objective fact. The game is so bad, in fact, it has resulted in the release of updated financial guidance by Ubisoft that sharply revised their fiscal 2019 revenue targets in a downward fashion. The document highlights Breakpoint and The Division 2 as the culprit, however, all signs point to Breakpoint being the majority cause. Simultaneously, Ubisoft also delayed a number of other releases such as Gods and Monsters, Rainbow Six Siege, and Watch Dogs Legion. This is where I must at least partially speculate. Ghost Recon Breakpoint was an unfinished piece of trash, that much is definitely true, and it had been overly monetized and undercooked. Ubisoft knew this well in advance of the actual release. With a long development cycle like this, it is painfully obvious when a game is not ready, and there were deliberate decisions to launch it anyways. The reaction was severe, and in a span of hours, their stock price cratered by nearly 30%. The price has since recovered most of that loss, however, expanding to a 3-month bracket, we can see that there has been a massive decline in the share price from well over $70 to under $50, a flat 40 at the lowest point after the delays and downward revisions. These double-digit percentage fluctuations, and not low double-digit either, they turn heads. People pay attention when a publicly traded company is torching millions upon millions of dollars in market cap, and some of the people paying attention have decision-making power. Ubisoft was financially punished for releasing an embarrassment of a game and expecting it to do well, as they should be. The delays point to a revision of their development process in order to release actual finished products, because continuing to pump out underdeveloped garbage would have a compounding effect as their audience reaches, ironically, a breaking point. These developments also come in the midst of a tumultuous time within gaming. Activision Blizzard is receiving letters from Congress for their ties to China, and the way they have handled public relations in the aftermath of Blitzchung's protest regarding Hong Kong. Fallout 76 and Bethesda are being metaphorically burned alive for the audacity of their annual subscription, which is riddled with problems and glitches. And all of it combined very clearly illustrates that current normative practices will not continue to function long term. I am by no means claiming that anyone should alter their perception of EA or Ubisoft, or any other publisher for that matter, but if user backlash is having measurable positive effects, I think it's important to take a minute and celebrate the fact that for whatever reason, corporate and consumer interests have aligned in a way that is far superior to what has become normal over the past few years. Publishers are in serious trouble, but that trouble is a complicated thing when it means that their typical process of screwing over consumers is no longer working, at least not working as well or having some severe side effects. It may sound like this is some kind of negative spin. I am saying they are in trouble, which after all sounds decidedly pessimistic, but when that trouble results in a pivot towards practices that actually benefit consumers, it alters the definition of what positive and negative is. Negative coverage aimed at creating positive results is hard to define. Coverage of negative events, negative for undesirable parties, that highlights positive effects is equally as tricky. And what it really comes down to is that some people are mentally and emotionally weak. They cannot handle the necessity of criticism. They don't know how to operate unless a disingenuous veil is pulled across their eyes through which the world is altered to appear more friendly. They cannot discern between positive events driven by negative feedback and negative events being covered in the pursuit of positive results. Those individuals within the gaming space who are incapable of processing the value of negativity and criticism are one of the primary causes behind the degradation of the entire industry. Their inability to think critically allows companies to exploit them, and through that exploitation develop a set of guidelines that damages the experience of everyone involved across the entire industry, not just those too weak to fight back. The conclusion that I draw is that positive and negative coverage are interwoven. Today, we see EA and Ubisoft react to negativity in a positive way, and trouble for publishers in this moment is undeniably beneficial to gamers. That's it for today. If you want to support, there are links down below, Patreon, Twitter, merch, etc., but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.